First of all, a very, very warm welcome and thank you to both Senior Advocate Jitendra Ji Gupta and Dr. K.R. Shyamsundar for coming together. And we hope our members get an enlightening issue. A lot of burning questions in their minds going on since the lockdown, especially since that announcement. And not only that, but there are other issues that we hope to cover, because that is not the only issue facing the labor industry. Murmundi, just a point of notice, if there is any past president, just let me know. If any past president wants to ask a question, we'll make sure they ask it directly. Huh? So I, on behalf of Merchant Chamber of Commerce, extend a very hearty and cordial welcome to all of you to this webinar. As you all know, an order was issued in March 2020, which has been corroborated by the state government and union territories, wherein employers of the industry and shop and establishments have been asked to not to deduct salaries and wages and to lay off people during the lockdown. Apart from this, many questions are emerging in the minds of our members. Is force majeure clause applicable on employers? Also, because this calamity has been declared as a force majeure for a lot of purposes, to suspend normal behavior and rationalize staff and workers to meet the demands of the crisis, despite the order. The issue here is that such a mandate has come from the center when industry and trade were hardly making any money. A question can easily be asked, when National Disaster Management Act was and the Epidemic Disease Act override all generic legislations, including the labor laws. Apart from this, something interesting happened and unprecedented. The crisis situation, in desperate signs or desperate measures, the Uttar Pradesh government suspended all labor laws for 3 years. Gujarat government elongated the shift time from 8 to 12 hours. The MP government also announced several such measures, and so on and so forth. So the idea is, are we moving towards a very, very relaxed labor law regime, one which is very, very industry friendly, or is it a temporary phenomenon? With these few observations, I now invite Dr. Shyamsundar to make his opening remarks before handing it over to Advocate Jitendra Gupta. Thank you and welcome on all. I take this opportunity to welcome all our participants, members, past presidents, and friends from the media. Just for your information of everybody, this proceedings are going live on Facebook and on YouTube. A lot of participants have logged in from these two mediums to watch the live streaming. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Dr. Shyamsundar.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. I thank the Merchants Chamber of Commerce and Industry for having invited me to moderate this an extremely sensitive but timely kind of issue that we are set to deliberate. To set the context that we all know, that I would just make a few observations to set the context that post the national lockdown, which was an extraordinary circumstance, the migrant workers' protests sort of shook the central government and various other political establishments. And on March 29th, the Ministry of Home Affairs, invoking the National Disaster Management Act 2005, Section 10(2)(1), and required all the industries and shops and commercial establishments to pay the wages, full wages, and on time during the period of the lockdown. Prior to that, the Ministry of Labor and Employment issued advisories, which remain as an advisory to kind of give a moral suasion on the part of the employers. And various state governments had either duly copied it and or made some amendments here and there, and issued some issued orders and some issued advisories. So, but this COVID-19 has been a very testing time and has created a crisis in both the product market and the labor market, which is of a far more greater magnitude than we have witnessed during the 2009-10 financial crisis. Even though we were isolated to a certain extent, and the then RBI governor his policy measures protected us. But what is significant about this COVID-19 crisis is that both the social partners, I use the language of ILO, I've been a consultant to ILO for long, industry and workers and their organizations, that is trade unions, all together have faced tremendous amount of economic issues. The business came to a standstill and the inventories were piling up, and certain industries, many industries, because of the total lockdown, had zero revenue during the month of April, at least during the month of, mostly during the month of April. And workers were locked inside their homes. And even if they wanted to work, they could not report for work. So it created a kind of a coerced unemployment or non-employment. We do not know. In labor economics, at least we call it as unemployment. But in legal terms, it might be different. And I'm sure Mr. Jitendra Gupta would be talking on that. So it's a kind of a coerced unemployment that has taken place, and the coerced lockdown of temporary closure of business, and which has led to a crisis in both in the product market and the labor market. And this has created more questions than answers, because whether the employers are liable to pay wages, and when the workers are wanting to go for work, they are not able to go for work. And what will happen to the industry? What will happen to the trade? What will happen to workers? And what will happen to some of the fixed term contracts? And what will happen to various kind of entitlements? A lot of questions have been doing rounds in the social media as well as in the webinars that I have been part of. And people have started talking about a kind of a new normal that we may witness the post-COVID, and work from home and other forms of new forms of labor market participation may arise, and which may also create legal issues, and which I propose to ask Mr. Jitendra Gupta during my his presentation. And the petitions that have been filed in various high courts jurisdictions, and particularly in the Supreme Court, by Mr. Jitendra Gupta and others, have sought to review the MHA orders, or even the constitutional validity of them. So a lot of questions are there, and a lot of doubts are there. And my students who are doing their interns, summer internship program, call me and ask me whether they are eligible for their SIP tenure, whatever compensation that they get. So it has created a lot of confusions. And it is in this context, I appreciate the fact that the Merchants Chamber of Commerce and Industry has thought it fit to organize this webinar. And my role is I'm basically a labor economist and industrial relations researcher with a bit of labor law orientation. So I may speak a little bit of economic language, but it should not be Greek and Latin for the business, because you do what we talk about. And so that should not be a problem. So with these observations, I open these proceedings. And may I request Mr. Jitendra Gupta to make his opening remarks, and then we can take the session forward. I believe this is a time-bound program, so in the interest of brevity, in the interest of time, I have kept my remarks brief, but I may step in as and when required. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Shyam Sundar, and thank you, Vivek Gupta ji, and all the office bearers of MCCI for having me here for this very important topic. I'll just try to see if I can put up a presentation. Can the host give me the rights? If I can, I'll try to share a presentation. Can I try now? No, the screen sharing is disabled, it's saying.
Munmundi, please make it the host.
in the meantime, see, the entire crux of what has happened in last 2 months is resting on two orders. One order was passed by the Ministry of Labour and Employment on 20th March 2020, which was more in the nature of an advisory, where the government said that they rather requested. Okay, now I think we have this. Okay, can everybody see? Can anybody see? Just not
Yes.
Dr. Shamsun? Yes.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
So as I was telling you, these are the two central government notifications which are at the heart of everything. One is an advisory dated 20th March by Ministry of Labour, and one is an order dated 29th March by Ministry of Home Affairs. Please may note the difference. The first is an advisory and second is an order. Now, Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India, by an advisory dated 20th March, they said that all employers, whether they are in the public or private establishments, not to terminate their employees, particularly casual contractual worker, from job or reduce their wages. Which means, as per this advisory, whether you are a government company or a private company, whether it is your casual labor, contractual labor, or your employees, you should not remove them from job or reduce their wages. Now, in a way, this advisory supersedes all the laws of relating to the labor without citing any law as to how can this be done. Then Ministry of Home Affairs, by an order dated 29th March, passed that all employers, be it in the shops and commercial establishments, shall make payment of wages to the workers without any deduction for the period their establishments are under closure during lockdown. Now, this is an order. This is a binding thing. Ministry of Home Affairs passed this order under the Disaster Management Act that all workers, please note the term wages and workers. Then the question is whether this is an advisory or binding. The order that the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued has been issued while exercising power under Section 10(2)(l) of Disaster Management Act, which is binding. Any disobedience to this can attract punishment under Section 188 of Indian Penal Code as well as Section 51 of Disaster Management Act, which carries a imprisonment of 1 to 2 years. Now, thereafter, we filed certain cases in the court. I have so far personally filed 4 cases. This was the first case which was filed on this subject, which is also called the lead case. The hearing took place on 27th April. It was filed on behalf of a Karnataka-based MSME, which has challenged the orders and has also sought permission to end contracts with the contract workers they don't need anymore. The government is to file reply. The matter is still pending. Then this is the second petition we filed on behalf of 11 MSMEs from Haryana, where we said that we are not against the interest of the workers. We want that the workers should be paid, but the entire burden should not be put on the employer. We suggested that 70% of the wages should be used through ESIC or PM CARES funds or any other subsidy or grant that the government can do from like other countries have done. Then this is the third case we filed. It's on behalf of a mining contractor for Hindustan Zincs, which is operating mines in Rajasthan. Here we have said that even if my factory or my premises are in operation, my workers are not coming because the workers are feeling that they will get the wages irrespective they come or not. So we said those who are not coming to work, we should be entitled to deduct their wages. Now, as I was telling you earlier that the 29th March order, the words used is worker and wages. So for the definition of workmen, if we see the Industrial Dispute Act, it excludes 3 categories. It includes those employed mainly in the managerial, administrative or supervisory category. Only for the supervisory capacity, there is a limit of 10,000, more than 10,000 per month to be disqualified. But for managerial or administrative, there is no limit. So practically every supervisor is getting 10,000. So all 3 categories we are taking are excluded. the sales force, sales executive and apprentice are included in the workman category. Then what is the definition of wages? If we go by a strict definition of Payment of Wages Act, then under the Payment of Wages Act as amended up to date, employee earning more than 24,000 per month does not come in the definition of wages. Then a question some of people ask, whether if somebody has accrued privilege leaves, earned leaves, can this be adjusted for lockdown period? My answer is, you can only do it with the consent of the employee. You cannot compel the employee to make these payments. Then the concept of no work, no play, the Bombay High Court recently in a judgment on 30th April has ruled that where the lockdown has been lifted, if the workers voluntarily remain absent, the management would be at liberty to deduct the wages for their absence. The same order has been followed by Labour Commissioner Madhya Pradesh also. Then can we reduce the workers? Under the Industrial Dispute Act, there is a specific provision for layoff and retrenchment of workers in the period of natural calamity, which is given from section 25 to 25N. Ideally, when these advisories and the order was in place, one could not have, retrenched the workers or laid off the workers. But thereafter, there is a provision you can do it, but you will have to pay compensation in terms of the act. And this is my final slide, that with effect from today, the MHA order has ceased to effect, because when the lockdown was extended yesterday, the government issued in the order there is a clarification where they say, whereas save as otherwise provided in the guidelines annexed to the order, all orders issued earlier shall have ceased to have effect. Now the 29th March order is not a part of that annexure. So we are interpreting that that order is no longer in force. So this is my preliminary representation. I know the presentations we can soak very little. So I think it will be better if we make it interactive and discuss it and take it forward. So on that note, back to Dr. Shamsundar.
Yeah, thank you very much. They were crisp and they, of course, made things quite clear. So may I ask you a few questions to set the discussion going? No, I just want to, I definitely appreciate the diverse nature of the industries. We have the micro to small to medium to large. The range is quite huge. Now, as you have pleaded, many of the cases have seemed to be on behalf of the MSMEs. Now, do you think that the Supreme Court can pass the orders delimiting its orders only to MSMEs or a particular, or define some criteria for for interpreting the orders with retrospective effect?
No, see, first of all, that is a secondary issue, whether those orders, how that order can be implemented or in what manner can it be implemented. Our first line of argument is that these orders per se are not constitutional, because the Constitution of India does not permit the government to tell me how my business is to be done. That is the violation of Article 14 and 19. Now that is the first leg. Second is, we feel that this order also violates the principle of no work, no pay, or equal work, equal pay. Because here is a situation, if my factory is in operation, I am working, but if my worker who is not working is in lockdown, he gets his full wages. So it's a blind order which does not differentiate on that principle. Third is, even if you see the Disaster Management Act, the Disaster Management Act is confined to preventing the spread of disaster.
Right.
But when it comes to creating a fund, the government has the power to create a fund for prevention and mitigating both. The government has also the power to take a property of a private individual, but the government is bound to compensate for taking any such property which they do. Like today, if the government feels that a hotel or a building or a college is to be made into a quarantine center, then the government may be liable to pay a compensation to that extent. Now, here is a case, it's like a social responsibility. It's the government responsibility, but the government wants to shift the entire burden on the employer, telling them that just because the worker is being prevented from working, you pay them the entire wages. So this is the reason why there are so many other reasons we have cited why this is
Right.
contrary to the constitution. Now come to the second part. Suppose if we cross the constitutional hurdle and we say that, okay, the order holds good in terms of law, then the question will come how this needs to be interpreted. I see no reason why this should differentiate between the small, medium or the large. Practically, the impact on the industry overall is the same. In fact, one of the petitions, the mining contractor is not under the SME category. He is not under the because if the government has recently redefined, reclassified the definition of MSME. Otherwise, earlier MSME definition was confined to the investment limit. And beyond the investment limit of 5 crore, and in service sector it was even less, one would not qualify for being an MSME. So I don't see that the benefit could be confined. But of course, the government can give some additional benefit, some additional subsidy to MSME as a level playing field if they feel so.
Okay, thanks a lot. I mean, let me play the devil's advocate for a moment. Firstly, as for the constitutionality of the NDMA, one of the provisions that is often cited by some advocates is that Article 72 of the NDMA makes it very clear that the provisions of this act shall have effect notwithstanding any inconsistent therewith contained in any other law for the time being in force or in any instrument having effect by virtue of any law other than this act. So I am told that this Article 72 virtually overrides every other law that is being enforced.
No,
so,
that will not. Okay, please complete your question.
Sorry, this is one kind of argument that has been made by a labor advocate friend with whom I had a conversation recently. So you may consider this Article 72, which is contained in NDMA. But now let us look at this. Let me play the devil's advocate just to generate interest. Let us look from the worker side. Well, you see, I am able and willing to supply my labor services to the firm in which I have a contract, a permanent contract, regular contract, or a contingent contract, or fixed term contract, any contract. Now this the forces beyond my powers, say the national lockdown, has prevented me from going out of my place, and nor there were any public facilities, transportation facilities available. So I don't care who bears the expenses, but I must get my wages because I was prevented from reporting for work. So it may not amount to a layoff compensation, but I am eligible for some kind of a compensation. But I would rather, being a vested, self-interested person, I would ask for a full payment because I have been prevented. This is a coerced non-employment. So what would be the defense? And it's also a right to equality. The same Article 14 can be turned, twisted on its back.
See, first I'll answer the part where you say, I do not deny that the Disaster Management Act has an overriding effect. But if you read that section that you just quoted, it says the provisions of this act will have an overriding effect. But whether the order that has been passed is in consonance with the provisions of the act is the question before the court. My question is that under which provision of Disaster Management Act can an order be passed where a private establishment be compelled to bear a financial obligation? I have read this act and have annexed that act in the Supreme Court petition from one end to the other. There is not even a single provision. So the provision of the law will have an overriding effect. But whether that provision has been used properly is to be seen.
Right.
And it is only an order. It's an executive order. Even the laws passed by the parliament have to go through the test of constitutionality, and even a law passed by the parliament If a
Right.
section is ultra virus to the constitution, the court has the power to set it aside. Now,
Right.
that's the first line. Second, as I again repeat, and I keep repeating, that we are humans. We have, many of us, our entrepreneurs have thrived on the workforce. That is the subject matter today. Nobody is actually saying that the workers are not entitled for that benefit. Please note, we are not saying that the workers are not entitled for wages or the financial benefit or compensation. But we are saying that a compensation cannot be treated as wages. Under the definition of wages are for the work getting done. Even under the Payment of Wage Act or under the Industrial Dispute Act, you are asking me to pay wage, which is not applicable. Had the government said that you pay them a financial amount which is adjustable in future wages, that would have solved their problem of cash flow. They could have got some food material and they could have also helped their family. To that extent, there was a difference. Now, one, the term wages will not apply. Second, we are saying that if it's a compensation, then that compensation cannot be entirely shifted upon the employer. Like I have said that dozens of countries, developed than us and less developed than us, have given a wage like this, subsidy to the tune of 70 to 80% of their entire workforce from the country's corpus. Now, on one hand, our government is saying that we have doled 20 lakh crores, but how that 20 lakh crore is gone, I am not going on that. But I am saying, if we give a living compensation to a worker which is covered under minimum wages to the tune of 7,000 or 8,000 rupees a month,
Right.
then a crore of worker would have only need 7,000 crores.
Absolutely.
At the most 10,000 crores.
Yes.
And for 2 months, because now the period of lockdown which is under this MHA order is 2 months maximum. For
Right.
2 months, it would have been 20,000 crores. Instead of 20,000 crores, our government is saying we have doled 20 lakh crores, but the problem is not solved because the employer does not have the money to pay and the money is not going into the hands of workers. And for that also, we have proposed to the court that 1.2 crore workers are covered under ESIC. ESIC has a corpus of around 90 crores, where 30 crore is the reserve fund and the 60 crore is the surplus fund. ESIC reduction used to be 6.5%, which the government reduced to 4% because the funds were not being utilized. So we are saying, if out of those 60,000 crores, if we can see, the Prime Minister says that there is no cure to COVID except to remain at home. The ESI Act covers occupational disease. It covers disability not to attend work. We are saying, please treat COVID as a disability, as an occupational hazard. And in terms of that, if you can compensate the workers to the tune of 70% from the ESIC fund, because that money will not go to the government, that money will not go to the worker. And it is for such rainy day that the employer had been paying premium for the ESIC. So we are not against the worker. We are saying, please don't shift the entire burden on us. Because suppose if a company goes bankrupt today, though the insolvency acts have been postponed for a year or things like that. But suppose if somebody files for insolvency, then what will happen? Nobody is going to hire workers anymore. And the workers will then become a part of the restructuring plan or ultimately the liquidation plan. The workers don't benefit from that. So we have to have a very rational approach instead of a very impossible approach. That's my point.
Okay, I'll just, I won't take much time. A couple of questions are there. And in fact, I'm sure you must be knowing the Bombay bench at Aurangabad a few days ago heard a petition filed by Rashtriya Shramik Agadi in Maharashtra, and wherein the petitioners demanded that the contractor must pay the contract workers the payment of wages, pay the wages as per the Ministry of Home Affairs order 29th March. And in fact, the judge made a very interesting argument. He said that during these stressful times, the principle of no work, no pay cannot be used in these extraordinary circumstances. And On the basis of that, he directed the trustees to ask the contractors to clear the wage dues for the month of March, May 2020, subject to whatever later developments that may take place. So the question that is being, the High Court judge has said that during extraordinary circumstances such as this, the principle of no work, no pay will not have currency, should not have currency rather. It will be socially insensitive. And latching on to this, there is one more point that has arisen, that the International Labour Organization, ILO, has asked for 4 types of policy responses. One is fiscal stimulus package. Another one is supporting enterprises, jobs and incomes. And third one is protecting workers in the workplace, in which one of the suggestions it has given is to expand the access to paid leave. Now, the controversy is that while there is no difference of opinion that workers cannot be penalized, where should the money come from? Now, can you in your prayers maybe submit to the Supreme Court that, I mean, it is unfair to touch ESI fund or EPF fund just because there are unutilized funds, because ESI, as we know, is one of the most inefficient corporations in the world, and thanks to the inefficiency, the funds are lying, and ESI coverage has been limited. So the ESI funds need to be utilized for the workers, and employers are going to be eventual beneficiaries. And similarly, EPF funds are security for the future. Sir, could you just make a prayer to the Supreme Court that instead of asking from any labor welfare fund or ESI fund or EPF fund, just leave aside the workers' funds. There is enough fiscal space with the government, or the it may be CSR, it may be fiscal tax-funded payment, or it may be PM Care Fund. It is the state's responsibility to share fully or in some major proportion, as you have rightly said, in several countries like Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. We don't have an unemployment assistance or insurance scheme. Is it not? Should you not kindly pray that the state must bear the brunt, share the major portion of it, but not from the labor-related funds, but it will deplete the resources that will be available to them. And ESI is already, your point of has come from 6 to 4%. I mean, which is not a really good measure. So it could be PM CARES fund, it can be CSR converted into fund, or it may be fiscal space. Could you make this prayer so that the state is knows its responsibility? It has failed to provide a direct benefit transfer. It has failed to provide wage subsidy. Should it not bear a lion's share, if not the full share, and come to the rescue of employers? At the end of the day, the workers need to have money in their pockets, and the money is going to be pumped back into the market. I'm talking of simple economics. So the government is going to get back the money through taxes or any way, and the employers are going to get the money back in the form of revenue. So could you kindly amend the prayers to ask the state to bear the, lion's share or the full from any fund other than the labor-related fund? Thank you.
See, first of all, the prayer is not confined to ESIC. If you see our petition, the prayer says that subsidize the wages to the tune of 80% through ESIC, PM Care funds, or any other such government fund or scheme. So we are not specifically, confining it to ESIC. First. Second point is, I'm
sorry. Even if you even provide a kind of a channel to the government, they may latch on to that ESIC fund. So could you?
No. I'll come back to it. Just bear with me.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
If you would have asked me this question a week back, I would have said that the government should do it and the government could do it. But after what has happened in last 4 or 5 days, that the government came up with an astronomical figure of 20 lakh crore, and it did not work out in that direction, either to directly benefit the worker or directly benefit the employer. Much of the funds is nothing but a kind of a loan that the government is extending to the MSMEs. Now, I don't see any reason why an MSME should increase its borrowing and, you know, further make the future of its children and its enterprise insecure by increasing its borrowings to pay these salaries. That means the government has not really contributed anything, except maybe giving the moratorium of some interest or some repayment. But
even that is with a penalty. Okay.
So second part is that the government in the very beginning, at least those corporates which could have been covered under the CSR, the government, considering that it is not wages but it is compensation, or it's more like a corporate social responsibility, they could have permitted these wages as a CSR expenditure. Right. But then Ministry of Corporate Affairs came up with a clarification in the form of an FAQ, where they specifically said, in fact, that's a contradiction also which we have pointed to the court.
Right, absolutely.
They said when the companies were working, it was a contractual or statutory obligation to pay the salaries and wages. But during the lockdown, it is their moral obligation to pay. And since it's a moral obligation to pay, the question of these being qualified as a CSR expenditure does not arise. So they have said, so what the government is wanting is that even if a corporate has funds for CSR, they should divert it to PM Cares but not pay their salaries.
Yeah, yes.
So that is one thing. So there of course, then the only fund that is left is, now we get often confused between the EPF and the ESIC. We are not asking anything from the EPF because EPF is the money of a particular employee. It's a employee specific. If the PF is deposited in my account, it is my money, and the government has permitted them to withdraw up to 90 days, 3 months salary has been advanced, 75% of that has been permitted. So we are not asking anything from EPF. But I need to clarify why ESIC is being misunderstood. In some countries, we also have a paycheck insurance kind of a scheme where the paycheck is insured. ESIC is also like an insurance for the worker if he is unable to work because of any disability. Now, this money ideally cannot go to the worker in any form. It is not employee specific. It's an insurance corpus, nor it can go to the government. We are saying that you have a corpus which is unutilized. It does not change the fiscal deficit. It does not directly impact any worker's interest. If you today allow us to pay 3 months direct benefit to the employee from the ESIC, and we are saying you increase the ESIC deduction back from 4% to 6.5%, that way the replenishment will happen 50% faster. It can be done because we are saying this is a disability. First and foremost, it's our wishful thinking that the government pays it. But now, as on 18th May, the government has for headlines given 20 lakh crores, but that is not coming. So I don't think so that the government is going to dole out anything more at this point. Prior to the last week, everybody was hoping that the government will give them something. Now where we sit, I don't think so. We'll be living in fool's paradise if we think the government is going to give us the subsidy of wages also after what has happened. The only option that is left is, first is ESIC, which we may disagree. Second is, of course, the government may pay from a PM Care or any other such fund, or they may create a new fund. It is surprising that even after lockdown, the government of India has passed our renovations budget for parliament to the tune of 20,000 crores, and 20,000 crores is good enough to feed one crore worker for 2 months. The entire wage bill for the 1 crore workers who are under the minimum wage category would be around 20,000 crores, but we have money. So our parliament renovation is a bigger priority. That's why I'm saying directly expecting the government funds to pour in has now looking like an impossibility. That's why I'm not confining strictly, but I'm hoping that ESIC looks like the midway.
Yeah, you have given actually ammunition for your further prayers, that in your arguments during the next hearing, the kind of statements that you have made, they need to be made in the court rooms, so that the Supreme Court records it formally, and the government is made to make some sensitive responses, and even the Supreme Court may chide the government as to what is happening, that you have been so insensitive. So my request to you as the concerned labor economist, that ESI funds or any labor related funds, for which of course ESI employer is a major contributor, and should not be touched when the government has the wherewithal. And I kindly request you to make the prayer and leave it to the wisdom of the Supreme Court to see what it eventually orders. So I will, I will leave this matter at that, and I will leave it to your wisdom and considered prayers in your next hearing, and also to the wisdom of the Supreme Court. But as a labor economist, I feel that these funds are meant for the workers' welfare, and both industry and workers do stand to gain. And the government has the wherewithal to do it, and you have rightly observed of all the luxury expenses that the government is committed to. So I will leave it at that. But my last question is that, because we must give time to the, there are 82 participants who are there, is that, sir, what will happen to the the maternity benefit payment that is statutory? What will be the effect of the Supreme Court, your prayers and the Supreme Court order with respect to the continued liability of paying, responsibility of paying the maternity benefit?
See, any liability that had accrued on the day before the lockdown is actually not under the scope or ambit of the guidelines or the MHA order. Because okay, if somebody was entitled to a maternity benefit even before the lockdown period had taken place, then that is a statutory obligation that was there in any other case. We are only challenging that something which has been brought because of the MHA orders, we are challenging the constitutionality of the subsequent development.
Right.
Rather, if the MHA order goes, then the normal law will prevail. So if the normal law in normal law, whether the beneficiary is coming to the work or not coming to the work, her maternity benefit or her paid leaves or unpaid leaves will apply accordingly. So in that case, all other normal labor laws will come into effect once the MHA order goes or is interpreted accordingly.
Okay.
And if the MHA order is also in place, then what happens is the court has the MHA order read with the Ministry of Labour advisory says otherwise that the worker will be deemed to be at workplace. So that means the worker is already on the workplace. In that, if they are upheld, then the worker is at the workplace.
Right. Thank you, sir.
I'm getting a lot of questions from Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, and other methods. So I will now have to step in and ask some of those questions myself.
Please.
Dr. Sham, I'm taking over your role. Please pardon me for doing it.
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Because I thought it's easier. Otherwise, I'll have to forward those questions to you, and then again. Jitendra ji, some of these questions, could be monosyllabic answers also. We have a question from Shri Rakesh Shah. Under Industrial Disputes Act, whether a workman drawing above 10,000 are covered?
See, that's why I was saying, please don't get confused with 10,000. The 10,000 is specifically to supervisor. And in my understanding, every supervisor gets 10,000. So in Industrial Dispute Act, actually salary monetary limit is not there, but the role in which you have hired somebody is important. If you have hired somebody who is working mainly in the managerial, administrative or supervisory capacity, then that person is not a worker. Yes, your accounts manager is not a worker, but accounts executive who punches the vouchers is a worker.
Dr. Sham, I have a couple of questions for you. You can reflect on them. and answer them after some time. These are actually interesting questions, which I thought, one of them is on the migrant thing we were discussing before this. So you can probably, share your thoughts on the migrant workers.
Okay.
The second is, one second. Most of them are related: local interference, migrant workers.
Yeah, I got 3 questions, which
Yeah.
are 2 of them are migrant worker, but there is a question that has come, which Jitendra ji might feel interested to answer. When you are suppose your prayers are answered to say that ESI funds could be used to pay up the wages, then there may be a technical query that someone has raised. So, I mean, should the workers who are not covered under the ESI also be paid? Should they be paid?
Yes. Then the government, you see, if the ESI fund is permitted, then much of the load from the government is taken off. But then the government from the other funds, they should pay those workers who are not covered under ESIC. Then comes the PM Care and other things. But you see, we also have to appreciate one thing.
Yeah.
That there has to be a gradient also, because what will happen is, in a company like Reliance, even the Mukesh Ambani is an employee being a director. So the governments also, if the subsidy is also there, so whichever countries have come up with a subsidy plan, they have come up with a ceiling that the subsidy will be in terms of percentage, and there is also a financial limit, like the government has recently done in the PF scheme also. So I am assuming that even if a subsidy comes into picture, then even then the workforce will also have to come up with a plan where either by consent or otherwise there should be a reduction in the salaries also, because we should appreciate that not everybody has the same expenses during the lockdown period which they were earlier having.
Sir, there are few questions.
And we have seen that even the member of parliaments and the MLAs have voluntarily offered to reduce the salaries. So there should be some roll down in the salaries also across the board, if not for the lower strata, but for the mid-level management and the upper management.
Sir, there is another question latching on to the ESI. Which provision of the ESI Act will be invoked to make the payments using the ESI funds?
See, the provisions of ESIC is actually, we have the benefits section. If you see the benefits, if I'll just try to take up the ESI Act, it says if you are prevented from attending the work due to a disease or due to a disability, then you are entitled for benefits under the ESIC. Now the question is, my understanding is that the lockdown, as I keep repeating, that the lockdown should also be treated as a disability which is preventing the workers from going to their workforce. In
Sir, it
that
is not
case,
a medical disability, to be sure.
what is the definition of disability in terms of a dictionary? It does not say medical disability.
ESI Act has a specific scheme. If you see the scheme of the ESI, it arises out of and due to medical reasons. So I'm sitting healthy at home, and it is a systemic inability, not a medical inability. So how can it be legitimately covered under disability?
If I go by strict medical terminology, then sitting at home cannot be called as a treatment for COVID. Can it be?
No, it is an inability of
No, I am coming to your
inability. It's a
I am saying
inability,
no. First of all, let me know. Can remaining under lockdown, under self-quarantine, be treated as a treatment for COVID?
What will be the proportion of those people who are under self-quarantine in the total
Can we move on to the next question?
Yeah, we'll move. Sorry. Yes.
I'm putting a lot of pressure.
Yes.
Dr. Sham, I'm sure this is a very engrossing conversation. but some of it we will have to
Yeah,
take it out.
I'll continue, sir. Thank you.
My
Mr.
suggestion
Jitendra
to all the participants and other people, if your questions are not being answered by Advocate Jitendra Ji and Dr. K.R. Shamsundar, please send it to the chamber in writing. We will get it across to them and hopefully they'll respond.
Okay, we will continue the question and the session. Jitendra Ji.
Dr. Saab, I have to, Jitendra Ji,
Sorry.
there is some more questions coming in. I won't go back to the ESI, but is it constitutionally or legally valid to use other funds such as Manrega for paying wages? I mean, the idea is, what are the solutions? You told us the problems, and there are some ideas floating around. You know, in India, COVID, a lot of people are in lockdown. People are sitting at home. They are coming with all kinds of ideas. But what is tenable? Can we use the Manrega funds?
Not Manrega funds, but government can create any fund. Government can pay from PM Care Fund also.
No. The question here is that, Jitendra Ji, someone has asked, can the Supreme Court interfere in the policy matter of the central government like the PM Care Fund? If yes, under which article?
But suppose if the Supreme Court sets aside the order, then will the government like that none of the workers should be paid? See, if the responsibility of the employers go away, then is it not the ultimately living wages? Living wages is the responsibility of the state, even under the Constitution of India, to provide.
No. They are asking whether the Supreme Court is has a mandate to interfere with the policy issues like usage of PM Care Fund.
No. Please understand. Government is not before petitioner before the court. It is the industry.
Yeah.
And the industry has challenged the circular. Suppose the court holds that the circular is bad in law.
Yeah.
I don't have to. I have on my own given certain suggestions as to where the money can come. But
right.
Suppose I don't even give that suggestion where the money will come.
Absolutely, you are right.
And suppose the constitutionality, it has been held ultra virus that the circular is held null and void.
Right.
Then it is not my problem. I don't have to pay. The government has to see where it has to pay.
Yeah.
Even if the court does not advise, the ball is back in the government's court. Whether the government pays from X fund, Y fund, Z fund, it's up to the government. The government may pass a new ordinance, a new law, and may create a new corpus. It's actually not my. I am only suggesting from a fund that I know. If I don't know of a fund, the onus is on the government.
On the government,
not to
yes.
me.
Yes. Okay.
So I don't have to guide them.
Jitendra Ji, one more question that has come up is, do minimum wages need to be paid?
Paid, yeah.
If you at all need to pay, do minimum wages act are upholded, or are they applicable still? This is from Mr. Ghansham Saraf.
See, for the period under lockdown, when the government has said that you have to pay full wages, then it includes the minimum wages also in any case. But that's what I keep repeating, that those which are covered under minimum wages, you should not touch them. Otherwise, it will be treated as a violation of the Ministry of Home Affairs order. However, the people who are workers, not under the definition of workers, your managers, your top level management, if in their cases you reduce their wages to some extent or their salaries, then it may not be a different thing. But as far as minimum wages are concerned, ESIC contribution is concerned, PF contribution is concerned, as far as statutory liabilities are concerned, it's a strict adherence to it. Otherwise, it will constitute a violation, because the order says workers. So whatever applies to the definition of workers will apply in strict terms.
So if the wages have to be paid, all statutory provisions must be complied with.
Absolutely. But in case if you have a financial difficulty and you are unable to pay the wages in entirety, or you are waiting for the Supreme Court order, then you may pay a reasonable advance without making any statutory deductions. And in that case, you can pay the advance amounts. Like if somebody is not able to pay even the minimum wages to everybody and is paying, say, some amount as an ex gratia so that the person can buy groceries and all, then if you're only paying 30-40%, and which will be good enough only to pay the ESI and PF contribution. So in that case, you better pay it as advance and wait for the outcome of the petition. Though there is no stay, I am again repeating, the proceedings are sub judice, but there is no stay. Only an order to that extent has been passed in one petition, that no coercive action. That doesn't mean that you can be absolved of your liability.
One question from Mr. Sudhir Kumar Gupta. It's an interesting question. It's a last legal question I'll throw at you. The Supreme Court will only consider under Article 32 of the Indian Constitution whether the MHA can issue order under Section 2 of the DM Act or not, to this extent. Is this correct assumption, or the Supreme Court scope? I believe it's wide
No,
enough.
the writ petitions are filed under Article 32 only. We have filed a writ petition. In Supreme Court, writ petitions are filed under Article 32. In High Court, it is filed under 226.
Yes.
So and Article 32 is invoked when there is a violation of a fundamental right. My right to practice my profession has been, government is trying to interfere in the way I practice my profession. So my fundamental rights are being violated. So that is why I am very much, otherwise my petition would have been dismissed on the very first day. The notices have been issued. So I have in a way crossed that threshold of Article 32. Yeah. I can see some questions on the screen. If you can permit me, I'll just try to quickly respond to some of them.
Sure.
Yeah, you can.
See,
you can do.
Ghanshyam Saraf's minimum wage question has been answered. Then Mr. Sunil Khanna has asked that government is starting some major labor reforms. What will be the impact of such prospective reform? Mr. Khanna, the reforms that is happening is not happening at central level. It is happening at some state levels. And in states also, some states came up with an ordinance like UP, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. But that ordinance is basically to increase the number of working hours, certain norms related to overtime and other things. But that does not really have an impact on the issue on the hand. Rather, we can use it against the government that on one hand, the government is relaxing the labor norms, and on the other hand, when the industry is under shutdown, it is doing different. So that is in a way contradiction to what the government is doing. And then Sir, Vivek ji, आप कुछ कह रहे थे?
हाँ, Jitendra ji, we have some questions on our chat. This is a question from Mr. Brijmohan Beriwal ji. Can the government legally, is it possible to give grant sick leave so that the employees do get covered under the provisions of ESI, as Dr. Shyam Sundar was also funding medical disability? So can something like that be done? I mean, if at all the government decides to use the ESI fund.
See, if our argument is upheld that in a way this lockdown should be treated as a preventive treatment, to see what will have happened. Let's fast forward. Imagine the workers were coming to the workplace. There was a likelihood that it could have resulted in a community transmission. They would have got affected. They would have got contaminated. They would have affected their family members. And then the ESIC would have paid for the treatment. And God forbid, some of them may have lost their lives and that compensation would have come. So we have saved all that by putting them in the lockdown and not compelling them to be on the workplace. So if that is understood, that yes, it is like a preventive treatment, if it is permitted, then that money can come from ESIC or from any other fund. But so far we have been maintaining that it is a preventive treatment that the workers had. Otherwise, if there were no lockdown and we would have compelled them to come, then we would have risked their life as well as their family members' life.
Thank you. Dr. Shyam Sundar, some pointers for you, and you could probably do a summation. These are questions which have been thrown to us coming from other mediums. How can labor laws be made industry friendly and worker friendly at the same time?
A new labor law has been made, which is called the Employee Code, which has been codified, but it is yet to be put in place. So we already have an Employee Code Act 2019 in force.
So Dr. Shyam Sundar, this was one of the questions. If you have any thoughts on the theoretical aspect on labor laws, industry friendly and worker friendly. The migrant question, I think you can just give a quick roundup on what you want, what you feel out that. Manrega question has been answered. Sick leaves.
Mr. Kaushik Mukherjee has asked, I am repeating that as per the latest MHA order, the earlier orders are not in force as on today. So that means the order related to any other order which has not been reproduced in the new guidelines and the new SOPs will cease to exist unless they clarify. So that includes with the wages as well as the other issues.
Jitendra ji, one last question before we go to Dr. Shyam Sundar. It's an interesting question. And it's asking you to speculate beyond the realms of law. You know, Supreme Court is known to play to the victim and, go towards the victim. So who is the victim out here? Is the laborer the victim or the industrial establishment the victim? And point B of this question is, who sometimes the Supreme Court goes into a formula like, okay, let me give them the cost of sustenance, uh, for this period. And as you said, Mr. Mukesh Ambani being a director also is an employee. Technically, he's also a salaried person who's not taken a salary hike for last 9 years. So just to take a wild guess or wild, shot out there before we go to Dr. Shyam Sundar for his final remarks.
See, the court, when I'm telling you the off-the-record conversation, which
Yes,
we not find in
absolutely.
order sheet, the courts have been conscious. They said on every hearing that had this been a budget, this been a burden for 15-20 days, we could have easily asked the industry and said, you pay it and we are not going to interfere. But they have maintained that it has gone longer, it has stretched beyond, and it may even stretch beyond in certain cases. So there, you cannot expect the entire burden on industry. Either you bear it or you don't make it mandatory. Now, suppose if they don't make it mandatory, suppose they make it optional for you. I am saying even then some employers will have to pay because it is their workers, they will have to give something or the other. And as you rightly said, the courts may also find a middle way where they maybe make the benchmark as the minimum wages of the state in the as the benchmark, and ask the government to pay up to that extent from their fund and leave it on the employer and the employee to negotiate on the other end.
So thank you very much, Mr. Jitendra Gupta, for your for tackling all the legal aspects emanating from this MHA's order and the consequent developments, and clarifying all the potential legal difficulties and doubts that participants have had, including mine. But I wouldn't go back to what I said, but say for saying that what we teach in the B school is that there is a formal labor employment contract, but there is an implicit social psychological contract which builds trust between employers and the workers. And so long the employers are willing to pay, willing and able to pay irrespective of the Supreme Court directions, that would only go to build the very invaluable trust between employees and the employer. And that healthy practice must be continued irrespective of the Supreme Court orders. I'm sure good responsible business model will not only go by the law and go beyond the law. Having said that, I'm sure this conversation might prompt Jitendra Ji to rephrase his arguments before the Supreme Court, to squarely lay the responsibility of should the court say the workers should be paid wages, or it may be minimum wages, or it may be some kind of a compensation, that in my view as a social scientist and a labor economist, and that the government should be made to pay at least the lion's share, if not the full. That should be a very strong prayer. That can be a strong prayer from Mr. Jitendra. That is my request. And of course, good business firms, as we see Tata Steel in my Jamshedpur and various other places, they always go beyond the law. In fact, they anticipate the law. That brings me to the question about the kind of labor law reforms that could be at once industry friendly and worker friendly. That can happen only when there is a social dialogue. We have the tripartite forum. And in fact, India has ratified ILO Conventions C-144, which is a tripartite consultation on International Labour Standards Convention 1976, which requires the union government and the state governments to hold social dialogue with the stakeholders, do meaningful, effective, and complete social dialogue to be able to draft labor laws that will address the needs of the industry and the concerns of the employees. In my well considered opinion and research, that due to various reasons, the social dialogue forums, particularly the Indian Labour Conference or otherwise at the state level, have not been pressed into service. I have been writing on this labor law codes, and they are available on the internet. I feel that unless the government introspects and also constitutes a multi-stakeholder committee, including labor economists and lawmakers. We have 5 lawmakers who are in the national law universities and Department of Law in various law departments of the universities, who are far more competent to draft the labor laws in a very sensitive manner. It cannot a law is a social instrument of progress and transformation, and it cannot be allowed to the pendulum cannot swing on either extremes, which it is doing. We did it in the command economy, now we are doing it in the market economy. So we have to find the golden mean, the middle path of which Lord Buddha advocated, to combine efficiency and equity objectives, which is what the ILO has always been calling for. And ILO is there to provide a technical cooperation. The government maybe or may not be availing the technical cooperation because we are not privy to that. But from the way the codes are appearing, it appears to me that the government has not applied its mind. And the industry, I also appeal to the chambers to tell the government to say that they should hold social dialogue, and the social dialogue will lead to sustainable outcomes. And in fact, we are moving towards the sustainable development goals. So in that way only I can say that I mean the labor laws will be both worker friendly and industry friendly, provided we use the social dialogue forums and also take the experts' views and then take considered opinion. And finally, coming to the migrant workers issues, migrant workers, in fact, they were not visible at all. We had the Interstate Migrant Workmen Act in 1979. That was the beginning and end of the lawmakers and the societies concerned with the migrant workers. Now this COVID crisis has unfortunately, for wrong reasons, have brought them on the mainstream, and there is a huge and there is a very significant social psychological trauma that has penetrated the psyches of the migrant workers, and they feel trapped migrant workers in the sense that they are welcomed neither by the home state nor by the host state. But now we don't have estimates. Maybe around 4 to 5 lakh migrant workers might have returned. Had the Migrant Workmen Act has been implemented, you would have had some database. The industry is going to be affected as much as the migrant workers. The industry is going to face critical skill shortages. That is my concern. On the other hand, the regional governments are also looking inwards in order by creating job reservations for the locals. So there are very contradicting forces that are operating. But at the end of the day, industrial relations is all about providing economic efficiency and then equitable outcomes in the labor market. So as a neutral academic, I should imagine that the government comes up with some kind of a scheme for the migrant workers and be able to reskill them, or even resort to personal counseling if they be needed, so that there is a smooth transitioning of the migrant workers back to the workspaces that they are used to, so that the industry will not suffer from labor shortages, and also the migrant workers need incomes, so they will have to supply their labor services in the labor market. So it calls for a multi-pronged approach, multi-stakeholder approach, as per the laws that we have and the United Nations conventions that we have ratified. And together only we can achieve solutions. Any partial, simple, narrow, legal-minded reasoning or labor rights reasoning is not going to promote a socially and economically responsible and sustainable labor market decisions. That is how I would look at it as an academic, and I hope it answers the questions. I can only show the path. The outcome will be the joint product of multi-pronged strategy and the social dialogue and social consultation. With these remarks, I end my my role as a moderator, and I must place on record that my grateful thanks to Mr. Jitendra Gupta for his brilliant handling of these issues, and also by taking the case to the Supreme Court. I feel that he has. And he's going to make the government little more sensitive than they should have been. So for that, I thank him very much, and it's a joint responsibility, of course. And I thank the Chambers of Commerce for organizing this and inviting a person like Mr. Jitendra Gupta to the forum. And I believe more than 80 people have participated, and it has been a very illustrious conversation. And I'm sure this conversation will go off of this webinar. Both of us will be keen to answer the queries that may arise post this webinar. And of course, I thank the Chambers of Commerce for giving me this opportunity to listen to the voices of the industry and the concerns of the industry. And I stand educated, Mr. Jitendra Gupta, by your interventions. Thank you very much. And I request the President, Mr. Vivek Gupta, to make the concluding remarks.
No concluding remarks. My mind is still trying to process this amazing amount of information from both of you. And I think I go back equally confused when I came starting here. Confused not because of other things, but because I think new ideas have come up, new thoughts come up. And I am also an editor, so I need to do my research before I say something. Before I hand it over to Anirudh, for giving a formal BOT, on behalf of the entire chamber, all its members, the office bearers, a heartfelt thank to both Shyam Sundar ji and Advocate Jitendra Gupta ji. We take back a lot of ideas. The note that I would like to send from here is, we are not anti-labor. We need our labor partners. They are partners in our progress. We need them to run our factories. At the same time, there is a situation where there is no money in the bank account. I mean, it's not every time it's not about our intention. Sometimes it is just about practical things. And those who could have paid, March also, we did not get productivity for 7-8 days, but I think by and large, everyone has paid for March, thereby displaying that the industry has a commitment towards its workforce. And through all of you, migrant, local, whatever you find happiness, please come back. Please come. Let us all work together to put the economy back on track, so that sooner or later we all start deriving the economic benefits and servicing the cost of economy. Anirudh, over to you for giving the final word of thanks.
Sir, only one doubt. Will the link be provided to all of us?
Yes, sir. It's being live on Facebook and YouTube. You will get
for link for future consumption, so that people can. Yeah.
Monmundi, please make sure Dr. Shyam Sundar gets all the links, please.
Okay. Yes.
Also to me. Send the link to me also.
And Jitendra ji, आपके पास तो बहुत सारे question भी जाएंगे जो unanswered हैं.
No, I'll take.
You have answered them. You've answered some of them, but people have still repeated those questions.
We'll take care. Don't worry. Every question will be answered, even if it comes later.
Even for you, Dr. Shyam Sundar, there are questions.
Absolutely. And sir, your FAQs must be circulated, because they would answer most of the queries.
Absolutely.
Yes, I have given a document already. They could be shared with the panel.
Yeah. Right.
Anirudh.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. President. Just building on the theme which our President has said right now, I would just like to give a quote. Nothing is born in this world without labor. So starting from all of us, everything requires labor, and that is one of the most important components. So as Mr. Gupta said, that it is true that the industry is not actually against labor or fighting against labor. And to build on the theme of Mr. Shyam Sundar, he rightly portrayed that there has to be a social dialogue. And the need of the hour for the social dialogue cannot be more at any other time than today, because what we have concentrated on this seminar is mostly on what has to be done or what should have been done for April and May. But the bigger challenge in front of the industry in future could be, we would be looking at perhaps running our operations at maybe 40, 50, 60% capacity for the next few months. And again, that would be on account of COVID-19. But perhaps there would not be a strict lockdown wherein Mr. Jitendra ji could help us in fighting a case in the court. But traditionally, we'll have to work out a mechanism. And one thing which maybe the panelists can guide us on is that what are the common mistakes which industry should not, fall prey to in the next few months in trying to regulate the workforce, because there would be need for staggering employment, staggered duties, maybe reduction of normal wages. So these are some things where the industry might commit mistakes, and they would actually prove to be more costly because we would not be covered under any a pandemic act or a natural disaster act, and it would be more a situation which the government would claim would be a demand supply situation. So if the panelists could just throw 2 minutes on this before I commence my formal vote of thanks, or we could also leave it for a future discussion.
Let's leave it for future. Let's leave it for future.
Okay, so we'll leave it for future. So I'll take on the formal role now. It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be here and to propose a very hearty vote of thanks to our distinguished, to our great panelist, Jitendra Gupta ji and also Shyam Sundar ji. It was absolutely the need of the hour topic that you both have deliberated on, given us suggestions, and also shared your counsel on this. Jitendra ji has already been working on this for some time now, and his insights have really, removed a lot of doubts which were there in the mind of the industry and all the people who have attended this conference. I'm sure this webinar would, go out as a very useful tool when we go back. As our president also said, we need to go back, assimilate what we have heard and try to implement it. So once again, a very, very warm thank you to Shyam Sundar ji and also Jitendra Gupta ji. I know you all are busy right now, but at the same time, you've shared your views and you've shared it in a very frank and clear manner. And also we would like to thank you for agreeing to answer our members' question in future also. We, once again, a very, very warm thank you from all of us. And also thank you to all the participants who've taken out their time and logged on to this session. Thank you once again from everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Vivek Gupta, President sir, could you take over?
Yes, sir. Thank you, everybody. Namaskar. And hope to see you soon. Hope to see you soon.
Best wishes.
Thank you, everybody.
Best wishes.